Hi. I wanted to sit down and film a video talking about my labor. In 2 days, I'll be 4 weeks postpartum. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl on June 8th, which was a Sunday. And this is the first opportunity that I think we've both had to sit down and recap the whole situation, kind of memorialize it, just because we're not getting a ton of sleep. She eats every 3 hours basically, and that hour includes the eating, the diaper changing, the awake time, so we don't really have a lot of opportunities to catch up on sleep. I took a lot of notes on my phone, so I'm gonna look down at that every once in a while just so I don't forget anything. When I was pregnant, I started to do some research, and I came to my own personal decision that I wanted to try to have an unmedicated birth. There are a lot of reasons I decided that. One of them, first and foremost, was there's something called the cascade of interventions. Anytime you add a medical intervention, such as maybe an epidural or some other type of like artificial oxytocin, like a Pitocin, etc., it could lead to more and more medical interventions. And studies have shown that that could lead to a higher rate of having a cesarean, which I just really wanted to avoid at all costs. That was one of the main reasons that I decided I wanted to have an unmedicated birth. After getting involved in the unmedicated birth world, you really start to feel more empowered that your body is made to give birth. It's been done for centuries without interventions, so you are capable of doing it. So I was starting to feel like I'd like to experience that. I think it's very empowering. The last reason I decided to do unmedicated was I was really afraid of the epidural. Not so much the insertion or the needle and all that, more so the side effects, potential side effects that could come from it. There are some really scary ones, there are some less scary ones, but that are more common, such as like a spinal headache. So yeah, I wanted to try to avoid that if possible. Because I made that decision, Scott and I hired a doula, which, if you don't know what that is, it's just someone that is there to support you during labor. They attend births very frequently, and they have a lot of knowledge specifically about like positioning, so how to position me during labor to get the baby to move the way they need to move through the body. Our doula also hosted a pain management class that we took. So through that class, I learned things such as breathing techniques, ideas about using music to help during the labor, and then more physical things that you could use to counteract the pain that you're feeling. So one thing is called shaking the apples. That's something that Scott helped me with a lot during labor. And then also counter pressure on my hips. So that class was really helpful, and it made me feel a lot less scared going into it, thinking that I had some resources and some options of things to do when I'm feeling this really intense pain. In that class, I also learned about some options that are medicine but aren't the epidural, such as you could have morphine, or you could try the nitrous gas to maybe help with the pain. Last thing I did to prepare was I spoke to other people who had gone through an unmedicated birth, and that for me was the most helpful in helping me solidify my decision and feel confident that I was capable. So if anyone was considering to do that, I recommend speaking to someone who's gone through it, because that was like the most impactful for me. My due date was originally May 29, 2025. Prior to the due date, I did not have any contractions. I didn't even have any Braxton Hicks really that I could understand. Like maybe I had one or two. So at my 40-week OB appointment, I went in and they did my first membrane sweep. If you don't know what a membrane sweep is, it's where the provider will try to use their finger to get into the cervix and swipe around it, which separates the like amniotic fluid sac from the cervix, and that is supposed to stimulate this chemical called prolactin, I'm pretty sure it is. It's supposed to stimulate labor if your body is naturally ready for it. For me, it did nothing. They did that and I just went home and didn't have any contractions or any signs of labor. So that was that. So after 40 weeks, obviously I was incredibly uncomfortable being pregnant that long. I was trying everything under the sun to try to get things moving along. So I was doing the dates, the red raspberry leaf tea, sex, primrose oil. I was walking 2 miles a day every single day, which was pretty intense. I was curb walking, and I was doing the mile circuit as well as using the breast pump. All of these things are said to try to stimulate labor, and none of them were really working. So at 40 weeks plus 4 days, I had to go in for routine testing at the hospital that they do to everyone who passes their due date. So it was the fetal stress testing where they hooked me up to these monitors and they just were analyzing her heartbeat to make sure it was good. And I had to sit there for like 40 minutes and do that. And then the next thing was they put me in a room and they did an ultrasound to check the fluid levels of the like amniotic sac. And both of those came back good, so they were comfortable with me continuing on to try to naturally start labor. So everything was fine with the testing. We come home, we're living our lives. I go to bed that night, and for some reason, for the first time in the pregnancy ever, I woke up in a panic thinking that I hadn't felt enough movement that evening. Scott was still awake, so I came downstairs and I was like freaking out. I started eating food and drinking liquids in the hopes that it would get her moving, but I wasn't feeling anything. So, and like I had this paranoia because once you pass your due date, there are increased risks of bad things happening to the baby. So I think the testing during the day combined with that knowledge was just making me overthink things. So I asked Scott to take us to the hospital. So I texted the doula. I said, hey, I'm just letting you know, like, I'm a little worried. I'm going to the hospital. And so we get there and they bring me to a triage room. And of course, around that time, she starts moving and I'm feeling movement. So I felt kind of stupid. But it ended up being really beneficial because while I was there, they hooked me up to monitors that would like show contractions. And I didn't realize it, but I was contracting basically every 2 minutes. And I wouldn't have known that unless we went there, because I thought it would feel like people always say it feels like a period cramp, but it did not feel like that at all. It just felt like a tightening, and it was so mild that I almost barely noticed it. So
were they 2 minutes at that point?
Yeah, remember at the end when they were like letting us go, the nurse came in and was like, oh wow, you're contracting every 2 minutes.
Yeah, and she was surprised that you weren't feeling anything.
I mean, once they pointed it out, then I was able to be like, oh yeah, I do feel something.
Oh. Oh, is that what those are?
While we were there, they checked my cervix just to see if I was dilated at all, and I was not. Like, I was 1 centimeter, which pretty much is the way I'd been since the 40-week appointment. So that meant I was not in active labor. This was just my body getting ready. That trip to the hospital was at 40 weeks plus 4 days. So they send us home, and then nothing happens until we hit my 41-week OB appointment. Go in for another membrane sweep, and that time there was a little bit of like cramping and such afterwards, but labor did not start. At that 41-week appointment is where they were really trying to get me scheduled for an induction. So originally they had me scheduled for 41 weeks and 3 days, but I was kind of pushing them a little bit and I wanted to go further because I really wanted to go into spontaneous labor. So I managed to get an appointment at 41 weeks and 5 days, which is really great. Not every provider will allow that, but since I've had a normal healthy pregnancy, they were comfortable with me doing that. So I was scheduled then for my induction 41 plus 5.
Some people will schedule their inductions and then constantly keep canceling the induction and rescheduling so that this way they can push out the induction.
Luckily, I did not need to go to the induction because at 41 weeks plus 3 days, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. and I was contracting. And at that point in time, I didn't know if it was real labor or false labor. False labor is like a term for when your body is showing all the signs of labor, but you're not actually ready for it. So I came downstairs, I think around 7, and I started to time the contractions using a contraction timing app. The contractions were happening every 2 minutes, and they were lasting about 50 seconds each. And the 2-minute countdown is from start of contraction to start of contraction. So at the start, I'm 50 seconds in, and then I'm getting a break of like a minute, 10 seconds, and then the next one is starting. And typically the rule of thumb, and this is what all of the doctors will tell you, is when you've been contracting for over 1 hour, they are 5 minutes apart and they're lasting 1 minute each. That is your sign that you need to go to the hospital, that you're about to give birth. But for me, I just woke up and this is my first signs of labor. I contacted the doula that we have and she was giving suggestions, but I think we all knew that I was not ready to go to the hospital. In fact, my plan, because I was planning on being unmedicated, was to stay home as long as possible because I'm most comfortable at home. I can move around, I can eat what I want, drink. I have the shower, etc. But once you go to the hospital, you are kind of on their timeline, and then they can't do anything for you if you're not accepting pain medication. So it's like, why bother even showing up there too early? There's also the risk that they'll send you home, because if you're not dilated at least 3 centimeters, my hospital said that they would send you home. So shortly after like 7 a.m., maybe 8 a.m., I lost my mucus plug. You can Google what that is if you don't know what that is, but that is a symptom of labor starting, or a sign of labor starting. Around 1 p.m., my doula suggested that I get into the shower. So being in water, whether that be a tub or a shower, it's supposedly really helpful for the contractions, meaning like you get some relief from the pain. So I did that, got into the shower.
I watched her while in the shower. I had my head tucked in one side because there was a cold draft and she didn't want the cold air on her. So I'm sitting there through the back corner of the shower curtain talking to her while she was switching between a Indian style seated position and on all fours.
Yeah, I was having chills even though I'm sitting in this hot shower. So I asked Scott to close the door and we didn't run the fan, so it got very hot and steamy in the room pretty quickly. Our doula had suggested that Scott should really try to keep me hydrated because that is dangerous if I get dehydrated. So he kept like offering me water and making me drink between contractions, which was really helpful.
Loose term on offering. It was more of a forced drinking.
I was in the shower for about 1 hour, but because of all of the heat in the room, I started to get really lightheaded, and that gave me anxiety. So because of that, we shut the water and I got out of the tub and we moved into our bedroom.
We texted doula about it. She said that's normal. She's probably feeling results of too much of the hot moisture. It's probably harder to breathe. Get her out of the shower. You can always go back later.
Yeah, that was really scary. Having a panic attack was not fun.
Was it a full-out panic attack?
Yeah. It's just such, yeah.
Because I know at the time you had said that it was anxiety, but I didn't know that there was a panic attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that, I don't know what time, but sometime before I got in the shower, I did try to eat. Scott made me a bowl of soup and some bread with butter, and I kind of forced it down. Like, I didn't want to eat, but I knew that I had to because I knew that I was going to need the energy for labor, and as time got on, I figured it might be harder and harder to eat, so I really just forced myself to eat it.
Potato leek soup.
At one point when I did have a small appetite, I asked Scott if he would go out and get Chick-fil-A. So he went to get me like nuggets and a milkshake, and by the time he got home, I didn't want any of it. So that's how you know I was not doing good. I was like, put it in the fridge. I'm not eating that.
She had a secret stash of Chick-fil-A nuggets and a shake when we got home after all of this.
Highly recommend. That was great. Okay, so I get out of the shower, I go to our bed, and that's around like 2 p.m. And then the doula is sending us through text like different positions that we should try. One of them is the shaking the apples, which I mentioned previously, which I thought was the most beneficial for my pain and contractions throughout the entire labor. It was very strenuous on Scott, but you did an amazing job.
Early on, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
It was the continuous back to back to back to back
Every 2 minutes.
to back, and for 50 seconds at a time.
Yeah. After I was laboring in our bedroom, I was starting to feel not too great. Contractions were starting to be very painful. So I knew that the water was going to help me, but I also was worried about showering more in our shower because of the heat, but also because our water tank is eventually going to run out. And I was thinking the hospital will not run out of hot water, so maybe I just want to get there so I can get in their tub and not have to stress about the water running out. So I told Scott, all right, I'm ready to go to the hospital. We told the doula. She thought it was a little early, with my plan being to labor at home for as long as possible, but that's what we decided to do in the moment. So I know from our cameras that we got in the car and we went to the hospital at 4:15, and I don't remember the drive to the hospital at all. You took me and I was sitting in the passenger seat, just disassociated.
We made it there with pretty good time. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
The hospital's not too far from us. Luckily, it was only, what, like 20 minutes?
20 to 25.
Yeah.
It was probably on the 20 side.
And it was at 4:15, so like we weren't in any traffic, which was good.
Well, it was also Sunday.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It wasn't a work day.
Yeah.
So we pull up to the hospital, and we had taken a tour previously, so we knew where we needed to go and all that. So I got out of the car and immediately was contracting. So I'm just standing on the side of the car, like I can't even walk. And a nurse must have noticed and came out and brought me a wheelchair. So she put me in the wheelchair, and Scott went and parked the car. She wheeled me in, and then we basically kind of skipped the admin area where you're supposed to...
Yeah, you didn't even want to use the wheelchair at first.
I wanted to walk because I thought it would be better, but I just couldn't.
Yeah, she was hanging onto my shoulder. The lady comes out, be like, "Oh, you want me to get your wheelchair?" No.
I was a hero.
I'm doing this.
So they take me into triage, and they left me in the triage room for a little bit, but around 5:15 is when they checked me, and I was dilated 4 centimeters, which is pretty good. You have to be 10 centimeters to push and deliver a baby. So almost halfway there.
12 hours in, 4 centimeters.
Oh yeah, 12 hours at that point, yeah.
A little less, but close enough. 12 hours.
I was also like 90% effaced. Effacement is the like thickness of the cervix. There's 3 things that are involved in giving birth. The dilation of the cervix, you got to be 10. You have to be 100% effaced, which means the cervix goes from thick to thin. And then there's the station of the baby, which is how far down in the pelvis they are. But at this point in time, they're only checking the dilation and the effacement. So fully effaced is a really good thing. And then 4 centimeters is pretty good.
For any men watching this who are into cars, the station can be referenced to the offset of a rim for a car. So if you're negative offset, that's not where you want to be positive offset, but it's in relation to the pelvic bone sort of, and where the baby needs to be for you to be pushing. So negative is more in the body, positive is outside the body. Very positive is completely out of the body.
While I was in triage, one of the nurses gave me a labor comb, and I had been familiar with what a labor comb was, but I kind of thought that I didn't want one. The idea is you hold it in your hand and you squeeze it as tight as you can during contractions, and it puts pain into your palm, which takes the pain away from one location, helps your brain maybe dissipate it a little bit to a new location. But a lot of my training for unmedicated birth was all about relaxing and riding out the contractions and just letting them come. So I thought that maybe by squeezing that and tightening up, it would be counterproductive. But I was very wrong. That was a lifeline. I don't think I could have done as well as I did without that labor comb. I highly recommend the labor comb. I will never give birth again without one. So while we're in triage, I kept basically begging and asking, when can I get in the tub? And because I'm laying there, I'm having really bad contractions. And they kept saying we need to wait for a labor and delivery room to open up. You have to go to the room first before we can put you in the tub. So I was kind of agonizing a little bit there for about 2 hours. It wasn't until 7:15 that they finally put us in a labor and delivery room.
We got in there.
Yeah.
They got you squared up with your sensors.
Yeah, my wireless monitoring.
And then once that happened, they brought us straight over to the jacuzzi rooms.
Yeah, and there's only 2 in this hospital, but they're reserved specifically for anyone who's trying to go unmedicated. So thankfully one was available, but like if you have an epidural, you're not able to get in the tub or anything like that. So we go in there, I'm sitting in there, I got some hot water on me, I'm using the jets during every contraction because that seemed to help.
At first she was having us turn on the jets. So every time a contraction was started, I'd look over at the toco meter, the thing that says that she's starting to spike into a contraction, and then I'd have to reach over past her and press the jet button on in order to turn it on. And they didn't want the jets on constantly because it masks the heart rate of the baby a lot of the times. They can't distinguish between what the vibrations from the jets are and then the baby's heart rate. So we would have to turn them off each time for that.
But I was able to notice, obviously, when a contraction was starting sooner than you could. And that time that I was waiting for you to push it, it was like, I was like, no, stop, let me do it. So I just started pushing it. We also turned the lights off in the room, and at this point our doula met us at the hospital, so she was there and she brought like this galaxy projector, so I had the stars above me, trying to really set like a good mood. At one point Scott put on my labor playlist. I had made a playlist of a bunch of songs that just I really enjoyed. But once he put it on, I was just not vibing with it at all. It was very hard to like listen to upbeat like Olivia Rodrigo music and also be going through this really bad pain. So I was like, turn the music off, cut it. And then we had the galaxy projector. It needed to be more harmonious. I needed like soft tones.
We went from, Scott, can you please put on my playlist, to, can you turn that off? Please turn that off. Are you sure? You just had me turn it on. We weren't even, what, a song and a half in?
Yeah, literally, I was like, no, this is ruining everything.
Within 5 minutes, off.
So I was in the tub then for about 45 minutes, but then they made me get out because my contractions started to get even closer together than 2 minutes. And of course, with the jets, they were having trouble monitoring the baby's heart rate. And that was a huge bummer because that was the whole reason I went to the hospital, was to be able to get in the tub. So yeah, I had to get out after 45 minutes. And then at this point is where things start to become a little fuzzy. Like I lose track of time and order of operations.
Well, first, we get out of the jacuzzi. They wanted to bring her back in a wheelchair, and she decided again, I'm not getting in a wheelchair.
I don't even remember that.
I'm going to walk through the contractions from the jacuzzi room to the labor and delivery room, which wasn't too far. What,
no.
Maybe 20, 25 meters? maybe 70 feet, somewhere in there. But she at first was stopping while walking, and then she's like, I think it's better if I just walk through them. Mm-hmm. And then she would, all the way down the hallway. And I think the nurses were really impressed with you at that point, too. They were kind of like, oh, you just, okay.
So we get back to the labor and delivery room, and at this point it's around 9 p.m. and they checked my cervix again, and I was 7 centimeters dilated, which was like a huge deal. To go from 4 to 7 in like, what was that, like 5 hours?
2 hours? Oh.
Well, we got there, like, let's just say we got there
from
5 to 4 hours.
5 to 9, 4 hours, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. Also, once you hit 7 centimeters, that is called transition. That's the phase of labor, and during transition is when most people decide to accept medical intervention pain management, because it is very, very painful. So I was shocked to find out that I was at 7 and still managing. Like I felt like I still had some energy in the tank. I could still go a little farther. So that was really good.
At this point, we get back to the room. They do the checks on her. In the process of them doing the checks, she orders up the nitrous oxide bottles to make it so that she can give a shot at that.
Yeah, I wanted to try that out.
She orders up the nitrous. The nitrous comes. She tries to take hits of it while, I guess, in an all fours position, but leaning up against the bed. So, and she just wasn't feeling it. She was getting lightheaded, right?
Yeah, I just really didn't like, it felt like it was restricting my breathing, which I didn't like.
She needed to take full breaths of nitrous, and I don't know that you necessarily were at first. You were using your nose as well, and she's trying to breathe through this tube. They had a mask, and then they had a tube. She really didn't like the mask because it would flutter, especially if you didn't take like a really deep breath, I think. And then she was trying the tube, which then you have your nose exposed, which makes it harder because then you have to just breathe through your nose, through your mouth. And you were having a hard time doing that. She wasn't feeling the vibe at all.
I didn't get any relief.
Who knows if it would have? I just don't think because they wanted her to do it on every contraction. They wanted her to breathe it in at the beginning of every contraction, and it seemed like you just weren't able to make it meet up with it.
Some people get relief from it and others don't. I think I was just someone that did not get anything from it, so that was a bummer. At some point I get into the shower that's in the labor and delivery room, so that was allowed. And the contractions were very, very painful at this point. Scott came in the shower with me and was doing counter pressure on my hips to help at every contraction. And I was like sort of crying in between, just Like, I couldn't even stand really, so they put a chair in there with me. So I would sit down between contractions, so like for 45 seconds or 30 seconds. And then as soon as the contraction came, I stood back up and he would do the counter pressure.
She's saying that she couldn't stand, but she was standing. She was standing.
Well, because sitting down and you not doing counter pressure was, horrible pain.
Up until this point too. What time is the shower at this point?
I don't know. We don't know. Sometime after 9 p.m.
We think maybe, around 10:30, somewhere in that range, we'll say. Up until that point, remember, we're still having her every 2 minutes having contractions for then 50 seconds or a minute or whatever.
Yeah.
And me doing shaking the apples or counter pressure from that point forward. I'm not trying to say anything here. I'm just saying so that you understand my physical exhaustion at this point. I'm not like some very in shape person. I'm not out of shape either, but at the same time, every 2 minutes for 50 seconds straight, I'm putting quite a bit of force on her body or doing this for 50 seconds. Anybody who goes through this, there's a happy medium between using your arms and using your wrists. And if you can do it good where you have the pressure against and doing the wrist saves a lot of extra energy.
Our doula also was very helpful in giving Scott breaks every once in a while, so she was helping with counter pressure and shaking the apples. So both of you were working very hard for many, many hours.
Right, so you're in the shower. She's going through the labor in the shower. She has me come in there. I rip off my shirt, rip off my shoes and socks, run in with, these pants. Have my boxers on because I left our bag with the bathing suit that we brought for this purpose in the car. And I get behind her. The shower's over here. Coral's in front of me. The seat is in between us every time. She has the cord for her fluids for the saline going into her connected, and then I am just dropping down into a squatting position, and I think, was I kneeling? I don't even know at this point. And squeezing with water cascading down Coral's lovely back into my face, mouth, eyes.
He was being waterboarded.
And this was for 20-ish
minutes,
25 minutes, somewhere
I couldn't
in that
handle it too long.
Yeah.
So eventually I get out of the shower and we're trying various positions both in the bed.
Well, we went over to the toilet
first. I was going to say we went to the toilet, which is called the dilation station. Basically, when you're sitting on the toilet, all of that weight going down is forcing you to dilate because it's putting pressure on the cervix. It was very noticeable sitting there, feeling that pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, very noticeable. That's why I didn't. So the doula was like, just do it for 3 contractions. And it was brutal. I was waiting for the 3rd to be done and over with so I could get off. I also want to mention that this whole time I was in the care of one midwife and one nurse. They worked with me the whole time. I specified in my birth plan that I wanted to work with midwives.
Great people.
They were incredible. So at some point, the contractions start getting even closer and closer together to where there was a couple times where I had no breaks between contractions. Like one would come and the next one would immediately start, which was very difficult. And then if there was a break in between contractions that was maybe longer than normal, I knew that the one coming after was going to be very painful, like it was building up. So that was tough. The midwife believed that my amniotic fluid sac, my water, had broken partially while I was in the tub. They knew that because when I got out of the tub, the water had some meconium in it, which is the poop of the baby inside of me. So one of the risks of going past 40 weeks is the baby will poop inside, which is dangerous because then they could be swallowing that and it's not good for them. And the stress of the contractions probably triggered that. So she definitely had pooped in there, which they were still allowing me to continue on with labor, but it just kind of made it riskier and made them want to get her out a little bit quicker if possible. So eventually I was laying in the bed and the midwife said, at this point, I think we want to fully break your water because it was just like a leak. So they used a tool, they went in and they broke the bag and immediately just like gushing of water came out and meconium. So that confirmed their suspicions.
Gray water. With a brownish hue.
At 12:30 a.m. is when they checked me, and I was 9.5 centimeters dilated. So 10 is what you need to push. I was almost at the finish line. They said that I had an anterior lip, just a piece of my cervix that would not get out of the way, that was stuck. So
wouldn't let go, right? It was essentially still tensioned, whereas everything else was loosened up.
Yeah. So that was at 12:30. In between 12:30 and the next check, which was at 3 a.m., I'm still just doing positions. I found one that it had me feeling pretty okay, where I was sitting upright, and the doula was massaging my feet and Scott was massaging my head, and that was helping me like take senses down to my extremities instead of this center core of pressure and pain, and that was really nice. So I was in that position for a while.
I don't remember at what point we got into that, but up until that point we were still doing counter pressure and shaking of the apples throughout that entire time, until we got to the point where she was in that throne position. Then of course we have no access to Coral's backside. So then it was other alternatives, massaging of legs and calves, and eventually Coral gave in to the idea that I was allowed to touch her, because before she wouldn't allow it. And then all of a sudden she just realized this other stimulation, I guess, from other locations allowed her to focus on that instead of the pain in other areas. So I got in there and I was just making a rat's nest of her.
So at 3 a.m. they did another check on me, and I was still 9.5 centimeters. I hadn't gotten past that little lip. So that was like 2.5 hours where I was dilated at 9.5 centimeters and going through contractions that were very close together and very painful. That's not a typical labor. Typical labor, from what I've heard, you get a little bit more of a break between contractions, maybe 5 minutes even. I think if I had had that opportunity, I would have been able to handle it a lot better. But at 3 a.m. when I found out that I still was stuck, we were coming close to the 24-hour mark. During that whole time, I hadn't really eaten anything except the soup and bread and a couple crackers here and there, and maybe like some apple juice. So I was very fatigued. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I felt discouraged, and I was in a ton of pain. So around 3:30, I was like, you know what? I'm ready to call it. I'm ready to get the epidural. I need some relief. I can't keep going. And
even before that too, though, I think maybe around 2:30 or so, when she was still on fluids, before she decided that, she was asking for the morphine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she couldn't get it.
Yeah, I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll try this other pain management option, morphine.
Too far past.
They said they wouldn't do it at that point. It was too far. So yeah, at 3:30, I asked for the epidural, and that was when they were telling me that they might need to do a C-section, because they were having trouble with her heart rate and getting it to stabilize, because the contractions were coming so close together, and every time a contraction happened, her heart rate would dip, and then it would slowly work its way back up to what it needed to be. But because they were so close together, her heart rate just kept not stabilizing, and they were really concerned about that. So
yeah, by the time, sorry.
I was just gonna say, when they told me that they had to have a C-section, I was like, yeah, whatever, do it. I don't care. I know that means you have to numb me. So I was like, I'll do anything at this point. I cannot keep going. I need relief.
Yeah, I was getting the hint of sort of what was happening at times, and I was kind of piecing things together as her contractions would hit, and the baby's heart rate would dip after the fact. So after she would come out of the contraction, or on the backside of it, the heart rate would, yeah.
Sorry, camera died.
So I'm right in here. As the baby's heart rate dips after the contraction, it would slowly climb back up over time, and it would kind of do like 2 or 3 steps up and then 1 step back down, and it would kind of do that until she kind of got back up to where she was supposed to be, and then within 15-30 seconds or something like that, then she'd start to have a contraction again, and we'd be on this vicious cycle for a bit.
Mm-hmm. So in order to get the epidural, they needed to give me fluids first. So I got fluids around 4 a.m. and then I needed to wait an hour for those to work their way into me. And so at around 6 a.m. is when the epidural was finally placed in me. It took a while because I had to wait for fluids, but then I also needed to wait for the anesthesiologist who was in surgery to be ready to come and place it. The placing of it was tough because I was having really, really bad contractions, and you have to sit perfectly still. It's very, very imperative that you don't move. So Yeah, that was difficult. I had to like sit like this with my back hunched over, yeah, for them to place it. And I had a nurse in front of me. She's basically straddling me and pushing my head down. And she was giving me tough love, which I actually appreciated. So like I felt a contraction coming on. It was so bad, but I couldn't move. And she just was like, do not move.
Oh, she's
like, don't you dare move. And I was like, okay.
She was a forceful lady, and she knew what she was doing.
I was whimpering.
She grabbed Coral, was like holding her down, just up against her.
I had that labor comb in my hand. I was squeezing it. I was like, I wish I could draw blood right now. This is so painful. I was squeezing it as hard as I could. And then eventually they were done. They taped my back up, and then...
I'll interject and say, while this is happening, the anesthesiologist is getting her all prepared, gets ready to insert, but Coral is not able to like arch enough, so they couldn't open up a big enough gap for them to get whatever they get into the little small space in, I guess, your spinal cord or the spinal opening.
Ugh,
and as a result of that, she was having trouble getting in there, and something happened where then she had to get another new fresh kit to do so.
Wow.
And then got it placed. So there was a little bit of a slowdown where Coral was still hunched over, pulled in place while she was waiting for this to happen, and she kept getting asked to like arch her back more, but she couldn't, I guess.
Because I'm pregnant. There's a baby in the
Yeah, right. Silly me.
Like, they're asking me to do this, and I'm like, I literally can't. There's no more room.
Yeah, they definitely wanted you to, like, arch the top down a little bit more, or, like, maybe pull the hips in or whatever. But I'm sure in that moment it was, A, yes, you had a baby, but B, like...
I just couldn't.
How could you think about what you're doing with 2-minute contractions?
Yeah. So they placed that epidural, and then within, like, I'd say 15 minutes, I started to feel relief, which was heavenly. And after the epidural, the contractions spaced out. They were maybe every 5 minutes, and that is typical that's one of those medical interventions that could then lead to a cesarean. If you go in too early and you get your epidural too soon, it'll slow down your labor, and you're also on this ticking time clock to get the baby out. So anyways, they slowed down a lot.
We're gonna back up from that a little bit and say when they determined that she could get the epidural, they wanted to make sure that the baby's heart rate was stabilizing. From what we were able to deduce as time progressed, they were going to have her do the cesarean, but they also were going to authorize the epidural if the baby's heart rate was stabilizing enough. So in the process of all of this, as she is laboring, contracting there on the seat, she managed to get into a position where she was good enough to have the baby's heart rate kind of stabilize well enough through all of the contractions that they then determined, oh, if this is going to be like this, we don't need to have the cesarean. And I didn't necessarily know that at the time, but I figured that out sort of after we got to the point where the epidural came in, and then they determined, oh, we don't have to give her the cesarean, or we don't have to do a cesarean. But I was actively, not yelling, but very forcefully kind of saying to Coral every time I would see the meter start to spike and she would start to go into one of her contractions, Coral, don't move, just hold it, breathe, but don't move. And I just continued doing that, and after whatever amount of time, an hour's worth of that, and then you got the epidural, then things were apparently okay, and then we pieced it together like, oh, okay, the baby's heart rate is now stable, so that's why they don't need to now go into the OR.
Yeah, narrowly avoided it, thankfully. So the contractions started spacing out, and also the pain went away. So I passed out for about 45 minutes. I was able to get a little nap in, which I just don't even remember. I was out, and then I woke up, and all of a sudden it was daylight. And my nurse came in, and I asked her, I was like, what's going on? Like, when I fell asleep, we were in this dire situation where I might need a C-section, and now I'm asleep, and everyone else, my doula and my husband, are sleeping, and there's no one else in the room. There's no nurses. Like, what is going on?
The midwife and the nurses told me, you're going to need your strength too, so you need to sleep now. Go sleep. Like, actively, we're telling me, go sleep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was much needed nap. So at this point we're approaching 7 a.m. and there was a shift change at 7. So my midwife and my nurse were leaving and a new nurse and midwife were going to replace them. The new nurse and midwife come and they check me and I'm still 9.5 centimeters dilated, which it's been that way since like midnight. So I'm still dilated 9.5 centimeters at around 7 a.m. And then they checked me a little bit later, maybe an hour or two, and I was still 9.5 centimeters. So they're like, all right, this isn't releasing on its own. They suggested that maybe we try to start the pushing of getting the baby out. And in the process, the midwife could maybe move that piece of cervix out of the way. The problem was they needed the contractions to be closer together in order for that to be productive. Because if I just push through one contraction, they move it a little bit, but then we wait 5 minutes for the next one, it will just get back in the way. So in order to try to speed up the contractions, they put me on Pitocin, which I agreed to at this point. We're at the final stages. So they start a Pitocin drip. They start me on a really low dose, and it wasn't doing much. So they increased it. They notched it up a couple times.
They notched it up from 2 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you went to the active labor? No.
The pushing.
The pushing. I'm bad with terms. That's when they increased it to 6.
Yeah. So before I even start pushing, my doula gave me the peanut ball. So I have side lying with the peanut ball in between my legs, and that actually released the lip finally. So I was checked and they said that it was time to push. I was ready to go. Is this where you would?
This is where I'm not in the room. I'm at the cafeteria trying to get French toast and bacon, and then getting a text within 4 minutes of me leaving the room to go there. I get the text, hey, the midwife's back. Coral's ready to start pushing.
And then he comes back into the room with all this food, and I
put it on the table near the door where the sink is, and then come through the curtain area. And then we're sitting there, and was I actively holding your leg at this point, or no? It was a little bit before then?
Probably.
Okay.
It was before pushing.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was like, did someone bring McDonald's in here? Like, I was so hungry.
And I apologize. I thought I was going to eat it outside the room. I'd already had the lady make the food. I brought it upstairs. I had my tea all brewed, ready to go. And I was going to eat everything outside. And then I just was racing back up to the room, put the stuff down, walked over.
I wasn't allowed to eat.
Somebody bring in McDonald's? No, I'm sorry. I have food. And everybody's looking at me like, how dare you? I'm like, I didn't want to bring it in here. I didn't eat.
Yeah.
Till after everything was over.
Yeah.
My tea was dead cold.
The wafting smell
care.
of French toast and bacon was rough for me.
Because
like, I'm not allowed to eat with the epidural, and once I had the epidural was when I wanted to eat, because then the pain was gone. So yeah, not fun. With epidural, the pain was pretty much completely gone. There was only this really intense pressure that I was feeling at every contraction. And that was a good thing. They wanted me to feel that pressure so I would know when to push. So at 9:21 a.m. is when pushing began. And because of the baby's heart rate situation, she was very, like, what's the word? I don't know. She just...
erratic?
Yeah, she just needed me to be in certain positions for her heart rate to get back to normal. So it was a mixture of laying on my left side or my right side in between contractions, and her heart rate was stabilizing. But then every time a contraction would start, I would flip onto my back and I would notify everyone, and then Scott and the nurse were holding my legs in the air, and then the midwife was getting ready to deliver the baby,
monitoring the pushing.
Yeah, and I would push throughout the whole contraction. Yeah.
They had to have the doctor come in.
Yeah.
About maybe, I don't know, we'll guesstimate, and we'll say maybe 45 minutes into her pushing, they had to have the doctor come in because the baby's heart rate was dropping so much in between the contractions, where she was flipping from side to side. So they had the doctor on call come in to monitor and see if it was okay for her to continue with pushing. And at that point, I think that's when we changed from you being on your left side to you being on your right side.
Yeah.
And it helped the situation again, because
at
first it was the left side. And
the doctor was then fine with it. She was like, yeah, you can continue.
Yeah, the baby's heart rate happened to just recover a little bit quicker those couple of times that the doctor was in the room for it. And she was like, I don't see what the problem is here. I'm going to go off into the other room where the other person actually needs me. Good luck. And I mean, she was saying it in a funny kind of great, like, continue on way, not like a facetious kind of like, why did you bring me in here way. But nice lady.
They also told me, they gave me the heads up that the NICU people would be coming because of the meconium that was in the fluid, and also because of the heart rate issues that we were having. They wanted them to be in the room ready to go when the baby was delivered in case she needed some critical care at the moment. So they did warn me about that. So I kept pushing. I pushed from 9:21 until she was born at 11:01 a.m. So almost like a little more than an hour and a half of pushing, which flew by. It did not feel that long. It definitely felt a lot shorter.
For you, maybe.
No, for me, obviously. Yeah, and like it's such a weird sensation because you feel like there's a little human moving down through your body. Like, very wild. But yeah, they had a mirror set up if I wanted to look to see the baby coming out, but I was actually closing my eyes while I was pushing, and like I found that was beneficial. I really needed to just be in the zone. I was like, I really can't be focusing on a mirror that's across the room. I just need to focus on my breathing. I did feel the head as it was coming out, which was kind of cool.
The amount of visible space where the baby's head was.
Yeah.
When there was enough hair and scalp showing was when they finally asked her, like the midwife would be checking distance or whatever, and once the baby's head was far enough along to where it was going to stay there for a couple of seconds after each of the contractions, that's when they asked her, would you like to feel the baby's head? And she managed to reach down there and touch the top of her head.
As I was giving birth, like I think according to the documentation, it was maybe like a minute between when her head was out versus her shoulders, and during that time she had the cord around her neck. So I guess when the head came out, the doctor quickly took it off. Or midwife, yeah. The
midwife. It was like around, God, how? Yeah, it was this way, and she pulled it up around the baby's head because the baby was.
Oh yeah, also coming out a little sideways.
No, just sideways. Not a little, sideways.
Just fully sideways. So they got that off her neck, and then her shoulders came out. And yeah, the last, like every push I was supposed to, I forget how long I was supposed to, 10 seconds? It was,
10 seconds for 3 times.
Yeah, I had to take a breath, push for 10 seconds, relax, take another breath, push for 10 seconds. So do that 3 times in a row during the contraction. But then the very last one, she was right at the edge. So I did my 3, and they're like, another one. So I'd do 2 more. But then she just kind of flopped out in my, like, for my sensation, it felt like a fish. It just like was floppy and wet. But it was crazy. And
you hear that? You're a floppy wet fish.
Within a minute of her being born, she started crying. And they put her on my chest right away, and they started rubbing her, and she starts crying. And because of that, they were happy that she was okay. So NICU did not need to like take her or do anything with her. She was able to just stay on my chest.
Is it just me, or going back over this, do you feel just as exhausted as that day?
No, but I feel emotional. Like I could cry.
Okay, I'm feeling exhausted. Maybe that's a side effect of today. I don't think I got as much sleep today as I did the other days, but I'm just feeling that whole sensation of being exhausted that day.
Yeah. Yeah, they put her on me. I start crying. Scott was crying. It was incredible, and like we had kept her name a secret the whole pregnancy, so like we were able to announce it to the nurses and our doula.
So what's her name? Yeah. And they looked at me, and I'm like, you need to say it. It's you did all this work. You need to tell them the name, not me.
Yeah, and that was really memorable, and everyone was like, oh, that's such a beautiful name. I had on my birth plan that I wanted to do delayed cord clamping, so really quickly after she was delivered, the cord was not pulsing and it was white, so it was ready to be cut and clamped. So Scott was able to cut the cord, which is really cool.
Yeah, they looked at me and they looked at Coral and they said, we see you have delayed cord clamping, but at this point the cord isn't pulsing anymore, and it's pretty much white. There were, how do you say this? It's like, it looks like a corkscrew kind of, where you have a center tube and then maybe there's the veins around the outside of it, and there was only certain patches of those pieces of the veins or arteries or whatever is in there that had blood, so it wasn't a continuous amount. And at that point they said, you know, it's, at this point you're good to go, we think, and
Yeah.
executive decision to make that cut.
And then while I'm still holding her, about 10 minutes later, they delivered the placenta, which she did by kind of tugging on the umbilical cord, and then eventually it just kind of came out. That was, yeah.
She asked you to push a little bit, didn't she?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Maybe
sure.
she did, but I was just so like obsessed with this new baby in my arms, so like I didn't care.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a, just give a little bit of a push, and then you just...
Yeah. She had very good APGAR scores, which you can look up what that is, but that's just the health of the baby at the time of birth. So 1 minute out, she had a score of 8, and 5 minutes out, she had a score of 9. So 10 would be perfect, but that's very hard to achieve. And
which is surprising, being that she had a bunch of amniotic fluid and meconium in her lungs.
Yeah. She was 8 pounds, 9 ounces, so I guess a little bit on the bigger side.
Cheater weight, though. A couple of ounces worth of fluid in those lungs.
And she was 21.25 inches long, which is a long baby. But you're a long person, so.
Yes.
That's pretty much the whole birth story. I feel like I could talk forever about like after Pat and the recovery in the hospital and the aftermath of the epidural and how that went and all that, but that's for another time. This video I feel like is going to be kind of long, but I just wanted to walk through the whole thing because as time goes on, we're slowly starting to forget the details, and I wanted to document it, put it in one place, and maybe other people might be interested in how it all went. I didn't get my goal of a fully unmedicated birth, but I got really, really close. I'm proud of how I did, and I don't regret the decision to get the epidural. It was 100% the right decision, especially because I needed that nap to be able to do the pushing. If we end up having more children in the future, maybe I'll be able to do it.
More.
Another.
We'll go through that. Hopefully her contractions will be somehow normal.
Maybe just a little bit more
or
of a break
more average.
between. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I had just had a little bit more time between, I would have done it.
I think you would have aced that test.
It was very painful. I don't remember the pain now, I think because of the hormones, but I remember it was very, very painful, but it's very doable. It's mostly mental. Everyone says that, and it really is. If you go in thinking this is what I'm gonna do, like I didn't even really think the epidural was an option to me until way further on. I don't know, some people don't like to hear that because they're like, just it's an option, just get it, like why even bother? But I don't know, it was my own decision, and I'm really happy with how, like, it's empowering to feel like you made it that far. Like I went through all of that pain and I'm capable.
Doula, very helpful.
So helpful. So helpful. Highly recommend if you can have a doula.
Pushing Coral through sections where maybe she was a little not confident of her capabilities.
Yeah.
And just kind of reiterating, oh, you can do this, you've got this, you're doing so well, all those kind of things. Lies or otherwise. The idea of having somebody there that knows kind of the state and how far you've come and where you want to get to and can try to push you towards your goals is definitely beneficial.
So yeah, that's our story. That's our labor and delivery story. He was just as much as involved as I was, and we got a beautiful baby girl out of it. Here she is. This is our firstborn. She's a little hesitant of the baby, to be honest. She don't like to get too close. She's happy, she's healthy, we're new parents. We're not sleeping, but we're both on leave.
We're doing okay.
No, we're doing great, I think.
Good.
We're doing really good, so yeah. The end.
I'm a mommy.
Mommy?
I'm a mom.
Mamacita.
No, I'm a mommy.
A mom of what? A dog?
I have a daughter.